What is the science of reading? What are leaders doing to accelerate reading achievement? We answer these questions and more in Science of Reading Leadership, Guiding Minds, Transforming Lives, powered by Just Right Reader. Welcome to another episode of the Science of Reading Leadership podcast. I am super excited about this episode because we are talking to Lindsay Kemeny. Lindsay Kemeny is an elementary school teacher, speaker, writer, and podcast co-host who has a passion for literacy and applying research to practice. Now, we are really thrilled to welcome you to today's podcast, especially since you're actively teaching reading in the classroom right now. Our podcast usually features researchers and district leaders, so I am genuinely excited to have you on the podcast to get your perspective on education and the science of reading from someone who's actually in the classroom. So I want to know how you got to the field of education and how you came to be a teacher.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Terry. It's an honor to be here. I've always enjoyed teaching, but I didn't really know I wanted to do it for my career until my freshman year in college. And I grew up dancing, and I was a very serious dancer, and I had the opportunity to perform a lot. And one of the places that I got to perform was in the elementary school, and we would go to different elementary schools and do assemblies. And so it was walking those halls, seeing the students, seeing their work up on the walls, seeing the teachers, and being in that environment when I decided this is where I want to be.
I love hearing people's backstory, like things that they did when they were a kid, because I just feel like there's so much that goes into like performance and dancing, and it really allows us to build the confidence that we need as teachers to go in, because I mean, for the most part, we are the performers. We're engaging our audience, whatever age they are. So I'm always fascinated at what got people into the classrooms. Real quickly, you have written a book that K-3 teachers across the U.S. are loving. It is called 7 Mighty Moves. Can you give our listeners a brief overview about your book, The 7 Mighty Moves, and then tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write it?
So 7 Mighty Moves, the 7 moves represent 7 changes or moves that I made in my classroom after learning about effective literacy instruction. Now, I've always loved teaching reading, literacy. That's been my thing. But when I look back on my early years of teaching, I didn't have a lot of clarity. Like, I feel like my knowledge was really kind of foggy. I didn't know exactly what to do when I had a student who struggled to read and how to help them turn into a proficient reader. But I didn't know what I didn't know until I had some experiences with my third son. So my first 2 learned to read pretty easily. And so along comes my third child, and I'm doing all the same things I had done for my older 2 children, but he is struggling. He is struggling to learn his letters. He is struggling to blend. And I did all the things I had been taught in my early years of teaching and in college, and nothing seemed to be working. And it was really kind of embarrassing because I was like, I'm a teacher and I can't help my own child learn to read. And then it was, not until his second grade year when I finally decided, okay, what is going on? Let's do some outside testing. And that's when we found out that he has dyslexia, along with dysgraphia and dyscalculia. So that's reading disability, writing disability, math disability. And I just remember thinking, like, dyslexia, what is that? And that just started me on this huge journey. I had to find out, what do students with dyslexia need to learn to read? And that led to, what does everyone need to learn to read? What happens in the brain when you learn to read? And I just felt like the starved animal. I couldn't get enough. Like, I was reading, listening, watching. All my sessions at the gym turned into PD sessions because I'd be watching or listening to something. I remember watching hours of these lectures on synthetic phonics. And the more I learned, the angrier I became. I was like, why wasn't I taught about these things? And even some of the things I was taught in college have been debunked by the research. So I was really, really upset about that. And just also, I just very, very passionate about everyone having access to this information and every student deserving a teacher who knows this, like what we call the science of reading, just this evidence, this base, this research behind reading. And in addition, my son was diagnosed with depression, and it all centered around his struggles learning to read. And so I saw very quickly how tightly connected self-esteem and reading are. So that is where my passion is, because I saw with my son, he was just at the lowest point. And as his reading improved, his self-esteem improved. And it was gradual. And I saw that and witnessed that firsthand. And it just really made me realize how important this is. And so that's why I wrote the book. I want every teacher to feel confident in what they're doing and have a clear understanding of teaching reading, because I want more proficient readers.
That resonates so deeply with me, because I have always made this statement to my children that when you know something, then you're confident. When you're guessing or when you're pretending to know something, you're not as confident as you are. And I think that that is a general statement, right? And it goes to teaching. If we know why we do something, if we know the content, if we know the rationale, then we are more confident in doing it. And then that confidence, it spills over into our students. And I can just imagine frustrating or devastating it feels to a young child whose mom is a teacher or whose siblings know what they're doing, that just shift that feeling of what's going on. So I applaud you for that mommy's heart, that backed by that teaching desire that really brought forth this amazing work that you're doing. I don't want to give all of the secrets away, right? Because we want our listeners to go and get the book. But really, as we look at the shifts, right? As we look at those moves that you talk about, teaching phonetic awareness randomly so that we're teaching it more intentionally, or teaching cueing strategies, or moving from that to teaching decoding strategies, right? Or moving from this neglecting vocabulary and background knowledge to embracing them to improve comprehension. And as I was reading over all of the moves that you're suggesting, or all of these moves that you list in your book, it really feels like you're calling us to make a move from balanced literacy to structured literacy, right? And as we as a culture, as we as a community, as we as teachers embrace the science of reading, what do you hope that teachers will take away from your book? And then what makes these moves so important to that work?
Well, I hope one thing they take away is just how powerful this gift of literacy is, because really, I think this is the greatest gift we can give our students. Being able to read opens up the windows of opportunity for these students. It's huge. And I've seen that with my son and with my students, and I've seen the difference before they could read and after they read. And so I know my son is not alone. I had lunch with a man who learned to read as an adult, and he told me that he always had this pain in the pit of his stomach, and he said once he learned to read, reading took the pain away. And I just thought, wow. And just as educators, whether we're teachers or whether we're supporting teachers and we're leading teachers, whatever our role is, we all have this important role to play in helping instill this gift of literacy in our students. And so I want teachers to know how powerful this literacy is and how critical these moves are, because we can reach more learners this way. Like, why not teach in a way that's going to help all students instead of just all of them? I mean, instead of just some of them, right? We want to teach in a way that helps everyone. And then I want teachers to take away that this is doable. And there's no judgment here, because all of these 7 moves are things I did. They come from what I was doing before that wasn't so great into what I am doing now. And so it's very real. Like I know I felt guilty and upset and all the different things, and wishing I would have known this from the beginning. And what about those students that, I had early on? But we have the phrase, know better, do better. And that's just our motto, right? And there's always room for improvement. And then I just really want teachers to take away, I really want them to feel confident in their teaching. So
you said so many good things right there. I had to write them down, because I wrote down something and then you would say something else and then you would say something else. So I was like, hold on, let me write it all down. Because it was so good. I loved it. So the first thing, I'm about to create a t-shirt or a meme or something that says, reading takes the pain away. Because listen, that could be so many things. That could be everything. That's such a truism. Reading takes the pain away, right? We talk about bibliotherapy, all of the things. Reading takes the pain away. That's amazing. You should probably go and what do they call it? Copyright it to make sure that somebody doesn't get it and turn it into a t-shirt or something. But the other thing that you talked about that I think I really want to point our attention to so it doesn't get missed is that this book came from what you did. Not necessarily, yes, it's all based in research, but you're not asking anybody to do some or impossible task that is so heavy, such a heavy lift, that when they come away from your book, they're going to feel defeated already. But rather, you're highlighting the things that you did. The simple changes that you made from what you were doing to what you found in research would be beneficial, and then how you did it. Mm-hmm. And that is so important, because a lot of times as teachers, we're getting so many things thrown at us. And what you've done is you've cut through all the chatter and you've said, okay, you were doing this, try this. It worked for me. And I think that is super, super powerful. I am curious, because you're speaking as a teacher, and I think that that's really powerful. We know that we have district leaders. We know we have building leaders. We know that we have folks that are constantly assessing what's happening in our buildings and in our classrooms. So how would you say that these concepts, or the concepts that you're exploring in your book, speak to the work that district leaders are engaged in every day, or our building leaders? How does the concepts that you're exploring kind of speak to their work, or even allow them to effectively evaluate the work in the classroom?
Well, I'm in the classroom every day. I'm a teacher. So the things that I'm doing very much apply, because our district leaders and our coaches, they're helping support us what we're doing in the classroom, right? So I just think it very much applies, because they can see it. The closer you are to the classroom and getting kind of a peek into there, the better you're going to be able to support and know what your teachers need.
This episode is brought to you by Just Right Reader. A critical component of a high-quality explicit phonics program is applying developing phonics skills in real connected text. Decodables give children opportunities to read successfully and independently from the moment they begin learning phonics. For beginning readers, experiencing the joy of reading success is highly motivating and accelerates achievement. To learn more, visit justrightreader.com. That idea of building confidence, know what you're looking for, right? You've done a great job of spelling out even what it looks like, right? How does this show up in the classroom? And I think that you give a very clear lens for our district leaders to be able to see what they want to see, and know that it's know that it's effective or that it's actually happening in the classrooms. You talk a little bit about decodables, right? Can you share with us why decodables are so important? And you could even define them for those who might be listening and are not clear about what they are and why they're important.
Decodables are critical because we can't teach phonics in isolation. So the English language is a code, right? And we've got to teach that code to our students. We've got to break it down and we teach them the phonics, but then that's not enough. We need to give students plenty of practice opportunities. I love Dr. Pam Kastner, and she's often said, if it's been taught but not mastered, there's probably a practice gap. And I think that's huge in education. We have to think about how many practice opportunities are my students getting with whatever we just taught them. So let's say I just taught my first graders or my kindergartners that the SH together spell the sound sh. And we read some words with SH and we wrote some words with SH. Great. But now we need more practice. And so let's give them a passage or a decodable book that's focused on that SH to give them a lot of practice with that, right? So in a decodable book, it's very much centered. There's usually one phonics concept that's targeted, although sometimes there's some that's just a review. And the students are only being exposed to words that with spelling concepts that they haven't been taught. So before, and it's very popular in a lot of programs and in a lot of beginning reading texts where it's this predictable, repetitive text. And that is things like you open the book and you go, we cleaned up the car, we cleaned up the garage, we cleaned up the bedroom, we cleaned up the kitchen. And you give these brand new fragile readers these books that are filled with sound spelling correspondences they haven't been taught, like the word cleaned, right? It has a EA for spelling E. It has that ED suffix at the end spelling D. And you haven't taught that to your kindergartners yet. And so how do the kindergartners read that book? They memorize the pattern and they guess from the pictures. But this is not the most efficient way to teach reading. In fact, it's creating really bad habits. And there's no research to support this because you have to use these 3 cueing strategies where you're asking them to guess from the context or guess from the picture. And there's not research to support that. In fact, it inhibits the process necessary for reading, because what we want for those students to store those words in the memory, we want them to match the sounds they hear with the letters or spellings they see and the meaning of the word in order to store those words in memory. So with a decodable book now, you're giving them practice, you're giving them something they can be successful with, and you're really targeting the practice, right? So that was one of the biggest changes I made in my classroom initially, was switching in kindergarten from those predictable, repetitive texts to decodable texts. So they're huge. But I want to be really clear that that doesn't mean that you only use decodables. And I often say decodables are like training wheels. You use them for a short amount of time and you transition away from them as soon as the child is ready. So sometimes in the science of reading community, we tend to overcorrect. And then people say, okay, decodables. So now I only need decodables. And I'm like, no, don't get rid of all that beautiful, authentic literature. We're going to scaffold students into those, right? And I'm going to give them decodables initially, and we're going to practice, and then students are going to transition away from them and into regular texts. So
right, because I mean we're using decodables so that, like, we've said this for years, right? In K1 and 2, we're teaching our students to read, so they're learning to read so that as they get older and we remove those scaffolds, they can read to learn, right? And we say it all the time. And so I think that that's really, really important. I want to know from you what are the other critical pieces that you see in a structured literacy program, especially from the teacher perspective? What are some of those critical pieces?
There's a lot of things. So, of course, our explicit phonics instruction, where before, I thought I was teaching phonics. And if someone had asked me if I was teaching phonics, I would have been like, kind of offended. Like, yes, of course, I teach phonics. But when I look back at what I was doing, I was facilitating phonics activities. I wasn't teaching phonics. I had some great activities in place, but I didn't have any kind of scope and sequence to follow to make sure that I wasn't leaving these holes in my students' knowledge, right, of the English language, and so of the code. And so a huge change was just saying, learning what an explicit and systematic phonics lesson looks like. So that is really critical. Attending to phonemic awareness was another one, because I taught second grade for years and I didn't even know phonemic awareness was a thing. Like, I had never been taught anything about it. And I thought, well, maybe that's just because I graduated like a long time ago. But I had a really good friend who graduated about 5 years ago, and she was like, and she got assigned to teach first grade, and she just called me up in a panic, and she was like, I don't know anything about blending and phonemic awareness. Help, And I'm like, oh my gosh, are we still not teaching this? There's a good chance if you have a student who is struggling in reading that they have a deficiency in phonemic awareness. So that's another huge one. And it's so hard to pick just a few because everything's important, but we have to also remember the other side of Scarborough's reading rope. If you've looked at that language comprehension side, we can build knowledge, with students and provide rich read alouds to them from the time they're, in preschool in our schools. And we can focus on that vocabulary instruction, and that is going to help their reading too, because if they haven't heard the words or heard the oral language, it's going to be really hard when then they read it and they don't have, the knowledge needed for that. So lots of critical things.
And I wish that there's so many critical things, and there's okay, this is critical. But really, let's be clear. And I think this is important, because the research is supporting it and we know now more about how the brain works. Really, we're starting to see this coming together of all the critical things, and they're really working together. So if we can kind of do that explicit instruction and create this system, then it's not so overwhelming. It really isn't. There are little things you can do, and they all come together to build this strategy or this process by which our brains learn to read, and our as teachers, how we help our students read and learn to read. So I think that you did a fantastic job talking about all the things that are so critical. What advice, because we know that reading instruction doesn't end at the end of the school day, right? So what advice would you give educators on how they can support families, parents? How can we support them in making sure that reading instruction continues? And even what can district leaders do to really support families in this work?
Well, so as a teacher, I do the heavy lifting, right? And so I am doing the instructing. But how caregivers can help at home is with additional practice, because the students, like I said, there's that practice gap, right? And so I've created like a video I send home with my parents with some tips for parents and caregivers as they read with their children at home. And you are welcome to use that video. If anyone just looks for my name, Lindsay Kemeny, on my YouTube channel, I don't have very many videos, so it's not hard to find my tips for caregivers. I think it's called 5 Tips for Caregivers. And just giving them I'm teaching first grade right now. So another thing I like to do is provide decodable books for my students. So I will send home some books, 3 books on Mondays, and they return them on Fridays. And I have a parent volunteer who will switch out the books, because unfortunately, if a parent goes to the store or to the library and they try to find a book for beginning readers, there's a very good chance it's going to be these predictable, repetitive texts. Students are just going to either become frustrated or to pick up some bad habits of just guessing. And we really want them, like I want my students, when they read at home, to like practice those correspondences that I've taught them. It's great to be able to provide that or provide some guidelines for them for reading at home. If you can't send home books, there's a lot of passages available online. Some are even free. And not that that's forever, right? Because like we said, you transition out of them, but I'm talking about for the students that need decodables. So that's helpful. And I like to give my parents some tips of how to help a student when they come to a word that they don't know. And so in my video, I kind of just list like 3 little steps of what to do when they come to a word they don't know.
That's brilliant. That is really, really brilliant. I love the idea of giving parents the tips of what to do, because a lot of times, I remember I was in the classroom and I knew it was important to read. I knew it was important to read at home. And I would just say, just read with your baby at home. And a lot of my parents would be like, okay, and how or what? Or like you said, they would come back the next day and go, oh, I can't do that. No, it took us forever. And my baby was crying at the end. And so I think really giving them step-by-step intentional actions to take and then providing them with the resources where possible is brilliant. That's a great idea. We're coming to the end of this conversation. And I'm going to say, unfortunately, because I'm having such a good time. I love this conversation. I am a literacy lover. Early literacy is my jam. So I love this conversation. But you've given us a lot of great content, a lot of great information. And if we are to walk away from this conversation, our listeners are listening, district leaders, teachers, classroom, all of those who are listening, if they walk away from this conversation, what are the most important takeaways you want them to leave with today?
It's hard. But one thing I want to say is one thing at a time. We were just talking about all these critical things and I'm like, it's all critical, but you can't do everything at once. It can be overwhelming for a teacher and for a district leader to think we have to overhaul our literacy instruction all at once. So it's try not to feel overwhelmed and baby steps, one thing at a time, and be patient with your teachers, because be patient with the students, because it might not all happen in a year. And I just feel like every year my teaching gets better. And I'm so much better at, now applying the science of reading than I was 7 years ago, and so it's gradual, and we need to remember that we're all at different places in our learning journey, and we need to extend grace to ourselves and to others, because everyone's at different places. But I would just say one thing at a time, make a change, then add something else. This year, I'm going to focus on vocabulary. Oh, this year I'm focusing on that phonics instruction, whatever it is. Once you have a good handle on it, try something new. And for our district coaches and our admin, I would say, get in the classroom, talk to teachers, listen to them, see how you can support them, see how it's going. And that's, I think, really going to help you know the best direction to move forward for your district.
Great. Excellent. You did a fantastic job with that. I think those were perfect. I always love to end with something fun, right? So the question I want to know, our CEO at Just Right Reader, she's always asking us, or always saying that she's living her best life. So I want to know from you. I want to know, how are you living your very best life?
What a fun question. Well, I'll say I just got back from a vacation with my family on just a couple days ago, and it was so beautiful just spending a full week with my family, no other distractions, bonding. And I thought, I just thought that it was such a needed and a rejuvenating week. And so for me, living my best life, I just have to, it's like a reminder to balance all the different things, going on in our lives, to balance and to stay grounded and have that connection time. So I think that's what I'm doing right now.
I love it. Taking time to step away from the crazy and connect with the people who really ground us. That is indeed the definition of living the best life. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. This was awesome. If you are listening, please, and you are an educator, go and pick up Lindsay's book, 7 Mighty Moves. It is going to enlighten you. You're going to feel empowered. It's amazing. You'll love it. Thank you so much for being with us. We didn't ask this question, and I want to make sure that everyone listening knows where they can find you or how they can keep up with you and follow you. So can you let us know how we can follow you, where we can find you, and how we can just continue to watch all the amazing things you're doing?
Yeah, I'm on social media. If you're on Twitter or X, I'm just at Lindsay Kemeny. Same with Instagram. Facebook, I have a page. It's Teaching with Lindsay Kemeny. And my website is lindsaykemeny.com. So all of those places, if you want to reach out to me, you can do that. I have a contact form on my website. It's probably the easiest way. So yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much once again for being here. Thank you all for listening. Until next time, happy reading. Thanks for joining us. If you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. We will see you next time on Science of Reading Leadership, guiding minds, transforming lives.